5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Puck short.
Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Puck Shot podcast, a double episode this week, so I'm thrilled to be joining an NHL writer for NBC Sports. Please welcome back to the show, Mr. Sean Leahy. Sean, hi, how are you?
Thanks for having me, Rob.
I should say off the top, I need to give you extra thanks because we tried to do this yesterday. I kind of had some tech issues, so you were kind enough to hop back on again today. Hopefully that means things will run smoothly because the subject matter is basically the same as we tried to discuss 24 hours ago. But two of the big stories this week, I'll start in Philadelphia. Chuck Fletcher hired as the Flyers GM. Perhaps not that much of a surprise. He was the front runner for the job after Hextall was toughed out. Fletcher was with the Minnesota Wild previously, comes in hoping to resurrect the Flyers season. Do you think this is a good hire for Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely meshes with the vision that ownership has of the team. Ron Hextall his patience was what did him in. And the upper management, the Paul Holmgrens, the people like that are above Hextall's bosses, wanted him to use some of the assets that he's collected, the young assets between draft picks, but also some of the young talented prospects they have on the NHL roster, but also awaiting them in junior hockey and NCAAs, use them in trades to fill holes. Most notably, find a solution in net, which has been an issue, as we all know, for the Flyers for 30-some-odd years, really since Hextall was the goaltender for the Flyers, decades ago. But Hextall, he had a plan. He had a vision for how he wanted to build this team, and it was going to take a little bit longer than what the ownership and upper management wanted. And, they have a guy in the AHL, Carter Hart, who's still kind of finding his way in Leahy Valley. And he's the future, but he's only 21 years old. So, you don't want to throw him up in the NHL without getting a lot of pro experience, especially in situation now. You also don't want to start that clock on his entry-level deal if you're not sure what your financial situation is going forward with the amount of guys that they need to re-sign, like Ivan Provorov and Travis Konecny, among others. So, Fletcher is a guy who, in his time in Minnesota, definitely showed that he wasn't afraid to make some moves, make some big trades, make some big signings to try and have a big impact on the team. And his Wild teams, they did make the playoffs. They would disappoint once they got there, but they were a good regular season team. And I think with the Flyers not in a full teardown rebuild, there's plenty of good pieces on that team. So I think some shrewd moves here and there, trying to figure out a situation and goal. The Flyer season's not over now. I mean, you look at the Metropolitan Division; they're not too far out of that third spot that the Islanders are holding. So all is not lost, and certainly there's plenty of time for them to make up some ground in the season and maybe try and turn things around and be playing playoff hockey again.
As you mentioned, it's not a huge hill they've got to climb. They're only 5 points outside of the playoffs, this despite being 15th overall in the East, which makes it maybe look worse than it is. But as you said, the Islanders 29 points, the Flyers are on 24. Maybe a relevant part in that is they haven't just got to get past the Islanders, they've got to get past the Penguins, Hurricanes and Rangers as well, though. I mean, how much more does that complicate the task of trying to be a playoff team again when you've got to leapfrog another 4 teams just to get there?
Yeah, that's the thing in all sports, right? Is once you dig that hole for yourself, you don't just gotta climb out of it. You gotta climb over other teams to find your way there. And the Metropolitan is always been a competitive division, going back to the Patrick Division days decades ago, when Ron Hextall was playing. But you have teams like, obviously Pittsburgh's off to a slow start, but you kind of think they'll turn things around like they normally do. Carolina is still a question mark. The Rangers are kind of, I think, playing, and I think the Rangers now are playing a little bit better than many people thought. A little bit above their heads. They might come back down, but then you have Columbus and Washington, who should be at the top of the division because those are 2 very strong teams. Then you have the Devils, who are struggling, really falling back down to earth after last year. So, there's a path there for the Flyers to find a way into one of those, either that third spot in the Metro or one of those 2 wildcard spots. It's just a matter of, like I said before, finding a number one goalie finally to solve that issue, and then just taking a look at the team. the cap picture going forward. What are you going to do with Wayne Simmonds, especially now that you have James Riemsdyk on the roster? They could probably score a few more goals. So if you want to add a little more offensive punch, be a little bit better defensively, you got to give up some of those pieces, draft picks, prospects, maybe roster players, whoever it is. And, Fletcher is a guy who's done that before, and that's why he was the front runner right from the start and the favorite among Flyers ownership.
You mentioned Wayne Simmonds there a couple of times. He's one that really intrigues me, both because he has had some success in front of net before. He's a tough guy. He's got a great all-round game, but he is an unrestricted free agent next summer. So he's a guy who either, A, embodies what you would call more traditional Flyers hockey because of that physical element, but also is a guy they could trade to get some help back either via draft picks or some young prospects, because he does have a value, especially to a contending team. I mean, how do you see that playing out? I understand from listening around that Hextall wasn't keen on re-signing Simmonds, but maybe does Fletcher reconsider that and look to keep him on board?
Yeah, I mean, I love Wayne Simmonds. He's definitely turned himself into – he was a pretty good player in his few years in LA, but once he got to Philadelphia, I mean, I think he is the prototypical Philadelphia Flyer.
Yeah.
Tough nose, hard hockey, willing to scrap with another player, will stand up for his teammates. Just that toughness that you kind of equate to the Flyers historically. And Simmonds has been that guy. He could score goals. He's great on the power play, has a big body in the front, but he's going to be 31 in the summertime. And this is going to be probably his last big contract if he does end up getting like a long-term deal. And if you're the Flyers, you got a lot of young kids there. You just signed James Van Riemsdyk to a long-term deal, and they're kind of the same type of player in the same kind of spot. Do you want to commit 5-6 years to a 31-year-old Wayne Simmonds who plays a tough style game, which you also got to think in the back here, is that going to cause some injury as he gets older? Will he start missing games because of that? Or do you want to invest in new youth or in other positions on the roster? So, yeah, I think Simmonds is certainly, especially with their cap situation, they've got to re-sign a bunch of guys, a couple of RFAs, and then you just got to worry about what you're going to do in free agency in the summertime. That's $6-7 million that could be going to fill some either one major hole in net or maybe a couple other holes are over the roster. So that's going to be certainly a big decision to make, especially before the trade deadline late February for Chuck Fletcher.
I mean, you mentioned there, Sean, that the difference in Wayne Simmonds' game after he arrived in Philadelphia. I just pulled his stats up. So with LA, 3 years, he scored 9 goals his first year, 16 his second, 14 his third. Then he moved to the Flyers. 28 goals, 15 in 45 in the truncated 2012-13 season. 29, 28, 32, 31, 24 last year, and 9 so far this year. So, as you said, as a guy probably about to cash in on his last significant free agent contract, he's got some goals under his belt. And as we said, that physical element too. He's maybe flying under the radar right now amongst the free agent class, but I mean, looking at those numbers and what he brings, that could be a really interesting pickup for somebody, or an interesting re-signing for the Flyers. But as you mentioned, with Van Riemsdyk back in Orange, can they make the numbers fit? I don't know, especially when, and again you've hinted on this, what do they do about the goaltending? Because that has been, historically, to this day, an issue for the Philadelphia Flyers. They went with Brian Elliott, who traditionally had been relatively durable, maybe not an elite goaltender in the league by any stretch, but a competent one, a relatively reliable one. It's kind of fallen apart a bit this year. I think that undid Ron Hextall a little bit, but what's their answer moving forward? Elliott's a UFA, Neuwirth's a UFA, Anthony Stollart's is an RFA. We mentioned Carter Hart, but he's probably a couple of years away, I'd have thought, at least, right?
Yeah, I think, I'm sure they were probably happy to hear earlier this week that Gary Bettman at the Board of Governors meeting said that the projected cap ceiling could be around $83 million next year, which is about a $4 million rise for a team like Philly, who spends upwards close to the ceiling, if not at the ceiling, pretty much every single year, and a team that has, like we just said, a lot of guys that they need to re-sign, guys like Provorov and Konechny and Travis Sanheim, who won't come exactly very cheap, especially in a guy like Provorov's case. And that's money that's going to be allotted to them, but you're going to have that money to elsewhere, and goaltender is going to be the number one thing on Chuck Fletcher's plate is goaltending. What do you do with Dave Hextall? Whether you keep him for the rest of the season or wait till the summer. And I wouldn't be shocked if a guy like Sergei Bobrovsky, if they maybe take another look at him. They had him early on. Obviously, there was that whole 1A, 1B situation there with him and Ilya Bryzgalov, and then eventually Bobrovsky went to Columbus and turned himself into a Vezina Trophy winning goalie. And he's not having the best year now. Maybe the contract stuff is kind of stuck in his head at the moment, but certainly he's proven to be a number one goalie in this league and the guy who can handle the workload. And if you're Philly, do you look that way, or do you say, hey, we don't want to invest 7-8 years in a goalie. We want something maybe a little more short term, 2-3 years to kind of bridge that gap between whoever you bring in before you hand the reins fully to Carter Hart if he shows he's able to do it. So a lot of questions ahead for this franchise. It's going to be interesting to see how this kind of evolves in this first 6 to 12 months of Chuck Fletcher's reign.
I mean, you mentioned there the options available are maybe try and bridge it until Carter Hart is ready, or go big on someone. But Bobrovsky's obviously the big UFA goalie this summer. I would imagine Semyon Varlamov, also pending UFA, will look for some kind of long-term deal as well. Kind of like we touched on with Simmonds, it may be his last chance to cash in. Colorado may still want to keep Semyon Varlamov. Grubauer's not maybe giving them the same safety net they anticipated. We'll see how that pans out. But after Bobrovsky and Varlamov, you've got Mike Smith, who's not had a good year and is probably arguably been on the downward curve for some time now. And that depends how high you are on Mike Smith to begin with. Jimmy Howard, again, he's an interesting one because he's doing well on a mediocre at best Red Wings team. Cam Talbot is a curious case, though, and whether he would be open to a new opportunity in Philadelphia, even on a smaller deal, which then allows them to bring Carter Hart through, in a more measured approach rather than having to rush their top goalie prospect into the NHL.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because if you say, hey, go the short term option, well, they've kind of done it the last several years with Brian Elliott, Michael Neuwirth, and then obviously for the short time last season when guys were hurt, Peter Mrazek. And it hasn't worked. I mean, Elliott seems to be, if you looking at his career, he seems to be a guy that thrives in a 1A, 1B situation. He had those great years in St. Louis where he was kind of battling with Jake Allen. And he's kind of been the guy in Philadelphia. He was kind of brought in as the guy, and Neuwirth's been up and down, been injured. And it's just really been Elliott, but he's also been hurt, and it hasn't really worked out there. So do you look for that option and ease Carter Hart in, or do you, like I said before, do you kind of go for a home run and try and lure a number one like a Bobrovsky or Varlamov there and see if that works? Or because the rest, like you just went through, the rest of the goalie UFA options this summer are not really appealing. Do you maybe look to the trade route and see what's available there either by February's trade deadline or around the draft or in the summertime? So it's not an easy decision for sure if you don't have a legit number one guy in your system that's ready to go. It's like I said, it's still going to be a few years before Carter Hart appears to be ready for the number one gig, but they got to find a situation, a solution for their situation, because it certainly hasn't done them any favors for the last, I don't know how many years there in Philadelphia.
No, it has not. We'll move on from the guys who might sign to the guy who has definitely signed. Finally, the saga is over. William Nylander remains a Maple Leaf for 6 more years. He signed a $45 million deal on December 1st, very close to the cutoff of 5 p.m. Eastern. The word is the deal went through at 4:55 p.m., so they cut it real fine. Cap hit of around $6.9 million per season, which is kind of where the Maple Leafs want it to be, under 7. It's not quite where William Nylander's camp was coming from originally. They were talking about Leon Draisaitl money, north of $8 million, but I guess this is the middle ground. What do you make of this deal for Nylander and for the Maple Leafs?
I think it's a good deal for both. I mean, Nylander got what he wanted. He got a long-term deal with something around $7 million per season in that neighborhood. And I think the Maple Leafs kind of stood their ground a little bit and showed that they're willing to fight for to make the contract work in a cap situation where that's going to get even messier for them over the next year with guys like Matthews and Marner needing new deals. So it's going to be interesting to watch there. But for Nylander, $21 million of the $45 million is paid out after next season, which would make him a pretty interesting trade piece of trade bait. But then you have Kyle Dubas saying that as long as he's GM, he's not going to trade Nylander, which I think is a curious thing to tell a player at any point, especially given how things change so fast in this league. But Nylander after next season, he only has a $6 million. He still has a $6.9 million cap hit, but you're only paying him $6 million in cash per season, which for a young player, if he puts together another couple of 15, 20 goal seasons as he has already, and he'll still be, I think, 23, 24 by then. I mean, that would be interesting piece to maybe for other teams to acquire, especially when you look at their cap picture and there's only so much money to go around, especially if the cap is only $83 million next season as a ceiling. You still have Matthews, he's going to get 10, 11, 12, maybe even more. Marner's going to get a pretty penny as well. And they still have some UFAs. Maybe this is it for Jake Gardiner on the blue line, considering just there's only so much money to go around. And you also wonder, if you're going to give all that money to guys like Marner, Matthews, along with Nylander, Tavares, and what they're making in their cap hits, how does that affect the blue line? If you want to, obviously we know they can score goals. You just watch them every single night. They're one of the few teams with 100 goals scored this season. But you also need to have strong defense and strong goaltending, which you're getting out of Freddie Anderson. But you don't want to go totally offense and leave nothing for the defense. So it's going to be interesting to watch Kyle Dubas and how he navigates this and that team to keep them competitive. Because, but again, if they win the Stanley Cup this year, then you could kind of deal with some of those headaches going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point because, as you said, Austin Matthews is an RFA. I mean, Paul Lindholm is also a UFA. He's 27. He's probably expendable. But Marner, Kapanen, Andreas Johnson is also an RFA. Tyler Ennis hasn't really featured, but I'm just sort of scanning through their list, and there's some big names there. I mean, Jake Gardner's, as you said, probably going to end up being the odd man out because the sums just don't add up. They've already got around $56.3 million as a projected cap hit for next season, and they've got 12 guys signed. So you need to sign 10 guys, including some of those really big key restricted or free agents like Matthews. And it's such a curious situation, an interesting situation, especially given what's happened with Nylander. I mean, there can't be many GMs in the entire NHL facing this kind of headache outside of Toronto and maybe Tampa and Winnipeg.
Yeah, and this is where your farm system and your scouting system comes into play, and it is really important because as these guys, these younger players are getting these long-term and deals with heavy cap hits, and you're running out of space. This is where you're bringing guys through the system, through junior, through your AHL system that are on their cheap entry-level deals. This is how the Penguins were able to do it. This is how the Blackhawks were able to do it when they would, especially the Blackhawks. Every year we saw it. They win a Stanley Cup and have to shed a bunch of guys from the roster. But then you have these young guys coming through the system and being not just on the roster, but being impact players. Guys like Brandon Saad, and it would work, and they would win again. And obviously that well has run dry over the last couple of years, where they're getting some young players through, but they're not making that impact that the other guys had previously as they were coming through. So guys like Jeremy Bracco are obviously going to be huge going forward. Just stepping into that lineup, taking on some big responsibility, but also keeping helping keep the cap ceiling hit under the limit with their entry level deals before they're play well enough to cash in 3-4 years time.
I think we've maybe seen a little bit of the roster shakeout occur already in Toronto. Josh Levo traded to Vancouver for Michael Carson. Carson goes straight to the Marlies in the AHL, but Levo is a kind of a curious one. He was a third-round draft pick in 2011. He's only 25 years old, but he never quite took that step with the Maple Leafs, even though he showed flashes of ability. He scored in his Canucks debut against Minnesota on Tuesday, and this is a guy who maybe, as we've mentioned with a couple of others during the conversation, will benefit from this change and a chance to go to Vancouver, maybe play with someone like Bo Horvat and actually, get some top six time to see what he's really about as an NHL player.
Yeah, and certainly it saw it the other night where he got a pretty decent amount of ice time in his first game with the Canucks and scoring that goal. And when you get those chances, you obviously got to make the most out of them. And just there's some guys that as we see, as they go up and down between the AHL and the NHL level, they're just lifetime tweeners. They're guys that can have a short-term impact, but long-term, they just don't have enough to stick at the NHL level, so they're going to go constantly up and down. That's kind of what Leivo's been doing since he's broken with the Leafs about 5 years ago. So going to Vancouver, a team that certainly has a surplus of young players that are getting opportunity and more ice time to develop for a team that's kind of in a rebuild, I think that's a good spot for him. He'll get more of an opportunity to kind of show what he can and see if he can stick. And if it doesn't work out in Vancouver with the situation they have there, then he's just that. I think this is kind of it as far as him thinking he might get a regular opportunity at the NHL level. He just could just be a forever guy who's a yo-yo guy, just bounces up and down.
Another guy hopeful of a rejuvenation or a second opportunity is Daniel Sprong, traded to the Anaheim Ducks from the Pittsburgh Penguins also earlier this week. Marcus Pedersen comes back the other way. He joins the Penguins' blue line. Sprong's a real interesting one to a lot of people. He was a second-round draft pick in 2015. He's only 21. He scored 32 goals for the AHL Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins during the 2017-18 season, but only 4 goals and 9 points in 42 career NHL games. It's kind of a half of one, 6 a dozen of the other, in that he didn't have a huge amount of opportunities with the Penguins, but equally he didn't make the most of the opportunities he did get. With Anaheim having the injuries they've had, Corey Perry out, is this another guy who's got a great opportunity now to prove he should stick in the NHL on a team that's got opportunities to hand out to young players?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you're in the Penguins organization and you're a forward and you're dubbed a guy who could be a future top 6 player, it's tough to find a regular home when considering the guys the Penguins are already featuring on a nightly basis in their top 6. And he certainly had the opportunities to play with those kind of guys, and it just didn't work out for him. But he goes down to the AHL and Wilkes-Barre, and you see he's definitely a guy who can score you goals. He just needs to be in the right spot with the right opportunity, and maybe with Anaheim, guys are banged up, he'll get that chance, kind of like Leivo. The Leivo trade and the Sprong trade were examples of just those traditional change of scenery deals where it just wasn't going to work out long term for this guy in this organization. Get him an opportunity in another place where they need someone like that, where there is an opening for that, and see if he can thrive. And certainly Sprong has shown he can score, and I think with the way the Ducks are playing right now, playing well, but also the fact that guys are out injured, Sprong will get that chance to show that he belongs in the NHL and can stay. And certainly, you watch him play, and that you look at that goal last night was beautiful. I mean, he has the skills. It's just a matter, like with a lot of guys, just give them a chance if they can get the ice time and be able to find the right chemistry with certain line mates, and they'll be able to do it. So it'll be fun to watch how both of those guys do in their new spots.
Yeah, and the thing with Sprong, he's got another year left on his deal. He's a restricted free agent at the end of next season, so 2020. So for the Ducks, it's a cost-controlled experiment as well. And this is at a time when they're trying to transition from the sort of big, heavy, kind of slow-footed at the same time team that we saw for several years and have success for several years into this slightly quicker unit. And Sprong, certainly with the skills he has, is in line with that change for them, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this isn't the 07 Ducks who've kind of, banged and clawed their way to a Stanley Cup. This is now they're finally getting around to adjusting to the new post-lockout NHL, where it's small and speedy guys, and a guy like Sprong and Andre Kasha and Ricard Raquel. Those are the young guys who are really going to lead that team going forward. Nick Ritchie as well. Those are the guys who, especially in Kasha, Raquel's situations, those guys are proven goal scorers in this league. So those are the guys going to be part of this future that Bob Murray, or maybe somebody else, if Bob Murray's not there after the season, will build around up front for that Ducks team, and it will hopefully one day, as the older guys like Getzlaf and Perry and Kessler kind of age out, the Kashas and Richies and maybe even Daniel Sprong will be the key pieces of the core of that team going forward.
From the Pittsburgh Penguins' point of view, what do you think Pedersen's going to add to their blue line. He's a restricted free agent at the end of the season. He's done okay. He's only 22, 6 assists with the Ducks so far this season, 1 goal in 49 career games. But, I mean, is this just a case of Penguins trying to fill some holes? They've had injuries. Justin Schultz, the most notable, but others have missed a little bit of time here and there. Obviously, Matt Murray is a key absence from a defensive point of view. I mean, the Penguins just trying to shake things up at the back and just see what happens and hope they can recover from this poor start to get back in the playoff picture.
Yeah, it's some depth. It's a guy who can be. It's almost like a lottery ticket. You add this guy to your blue line. And you're hoping it clicks, especially when you look at the work that Sergei Gonchar and Jacques Martin have done with certain guys on that blue line, especially young players before, working their magic. I mean, Jamie Alexiak is certainly a good example. Justin Schultz as well. And then when Schultz gets back in a couple months, it'll be a stronger blue line, and you hope Marcus Pedersen is able to kind of find a role there because, like you said, the Penguins are just kind of up and down lately. They looked good the other night, but last week against the Avalanche, they didn't look so good when they lost 6-3. So they're a team that's better than they're playing right now. It's just a matter of getting guys healthy and finding guys with the right fit, and especially on that blue line. You have a guy like Juuso Riikola who's still adjusting to the North American game and finding his footing, and then you bring a guy like Pedersen who's still pretty young and finding his way as well. So you're just hoping that they're able to find the right chemistry in the blue line and kind of at least help things for now while guys are healing up.
Moving on, I don't want to say away from the ice because it concerns ice. It's the Ottawa Senators' new arena deal. It looks like it's hanging in the balance. Senators owner Eugene Melnyk is set to sue business partner John Ruddy for $700 million over the proposal of Bretton Flats project. The latest entry in this incredibly bizarre run for the Ottawa Senators. We had Ubergate. Also, they've moved on from Erik Karlsson. They have several key players, restricted free agents during the summer. I mean, what do you make of the Senators' season so far, both on the ice and off it?
Well, I wish the focus could be on the ice because, I mean, even though they're not off, have the best record, they can score goals. They're an exciting team to watch offensively. Matt Duchene's having a great year. Thomas Chabot, great year. Mark Stone is enjoying a fantastic year and certainly will cash in along with Duchene in the summertime if they keep up the scoring pace. Brady Tkachuk is playing, is in the race for the Calder Trophy. Has been fantastic. So there's a lot of young pieces on that team that are exciting for the future. If you're a Senators fan, it's just there's too much stuff that happens off the ice that's been distracting from it between the Uber stuff and now this arena stuff, and even going back to when Eugene Melnyk last year at the outdoor game threatened to relocate the team if things didn't work out. But it's always something, one thing or another with that team, and you'd wish that the focus would be on the ice and not the drama off the ice because it seems to be a never-ending thing. But now that the NHL has settled the Seattle situation and they're in the league in 3 years' time, Bettman's focus can now be on this arena situation in Ottawa and getting that taken care of. And because if you've ever been to Ottawa, the arena there is a good 45-minute drive from pretty much everything else that's downtown. So you can understand why they want to get a new building that's closer to things and it can really help the attendance there. Which will be good for the team going forward because, like I said, there's a lot, they've done a good job of drafting and signing some young players there that can build around for the future. So hopefully that gets all resolved and the focus could be back up to the on ice product from the majority of the time going forward.
I mean, Gary Bettman did say at the Board of Governors meeting earlier this week that if their input of the NHL was welcome, that they would be willing to get involved and try and mediate, perhaps for a lack of a better word. And he pointed to the success they had in Edmonton and Pittsburgh in helping those clubs get new arenas. But equally, he did say, if we're not welcome or we're not going to help the situation, then we won't get involved. But at some point, does the league step in? Do they say to Eugene Melnyk, you got to pull your finger out, for lack of a better term, and sort these issues out for the good of the team? Because as a league, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right?
Yeah, and I mean, relocation is the last option when they've exhausted all of their options. Same thing as far as going and asking Eugene Melnyk to sell. I mean, I don't know how exactly that works among NHL owners and that board of governors and just the NHL as a whole, as far as asking an owner to sell. That things have to get pretty dire, and I mean, we saw what happened with the Los Angeles Clippers and their owner and the NBA taking over. Obviously, that was an extreme case with an owner caught on tape saying something, and Melnyk hasn't been caught on saying something like that yet, but who knows? We'll see. But nothing like that's happened. But like I said, things have to be pretty dire for the league to step in and kind of find a new owner there. But right now, they're going to exhaust because the arena in Ottawa is still in good shape. It's not one of these decrepit 60-year-old buildings like Joe Louis Arena or Nassau Coliseum used to be. It's still in good shape. It's just a matter of finding something a little bit closer, and the league's going to, they're going to fight. Bettman likes to fight for their franchise. I mean, look how long he's been fighting for the Arizona Coyotes. Yeah. It's been over a decade now. So a team like Ottawa, who has been in the league now 26 years, I think it is, they're going to do as much as they can to find some sort of solution, whether it's this proposal now or maybe something else that's maybe someone else could come up with to keep the team closer to the downtown area.
We mentioned earlier, if you're Mark Stone or Matt Duchene, unrestricted free agents this summer, both scoring points. Duchene has 34 points in 28 games. Stone has 30 in 28 games. But they've got this kind of circus going on around them. I mean, they're a heck of a lot of fun to watch. As a neutral, they've scored 100 goals. They're one of only 5 teams to hit the 100-goal marker so far this season. They've also conceded a league-high 114, so it's not like the Senators' games are lacking of action. They're winning games 4-3, losing 5-4. I know they got blown out by the Sabres a few weeks ago, but the on-ice product is at least entertaining to watch, sometimes in a warped way. But equally, if you're thinking of joining the Senators, or in this case, re-signing, all these things that are going on, they must surely play into your decision.
Oh, for sure, especially Stone and Duchene. They're in their late 20s or mid to late 20s. So this could be their only chance at an 8-year big money deal. Because right now the way they're playing, they're going to be able to cash in, get that 8-year deal or 7-year deal somewhere for a lot of money, $8, $9, $10 million a year, depending on how the year is finished. So they don't want to risk something with a short-term deal and obviously risk getting injury and all that stuff. So they've said all the right things so far. At least Duchene has, as far as thinking about resigning, but when it comes to free agency, they're going to have plenty of suitors, and they're going to be able to probably pick where they want to go. And I'm also curious to see the Senators stay where they are in the standings. Will either of them be on the move by the trade deadline with the expiring contracts? So certainly either one of them could help a team that's heading towards the playoff and looking to bolster an area of their roster for a Stanley Cup run. So, or if they end up wanting to commit to the Senators long term, especially like we just talked about, there's certainly enough young players there where the next 3-4 years, you'd think the way their Senators are going, they could find a solution in goal once Craig Anderson ages out. They could be back to being a playoff team. So it's hard to tell. Having guys like Stone and Duchene, part of that will certainly help. But if they're not there, then you gotta wonder where else they're gonna look to get some big name players to really make an impact on that team.
Interesting times indeed. All right, Sean, we're running low on time now. There is one question I would like to finish with. I'm putting you on the spot slightly. We've talked about the Maple Leafs. Tampa Bay Lightning are doing well. Nashville Predators are doing well. Winnipeg Jets are coming up in the conversation now and again. If I asked you right now who you think would win the Stanley Cup this year, who would you say?
I'm going to stick with my preseason prediction. I had the Predators over the Lightning, and right now that's a pretty chalk pick. 2 of the best teams, not just in their conferences, but in the league overall. I just like the way Tampa's been building to this, and just they're so strong up and down the roster. Even while Andrei Vasilevsky has been injured, Louis Domingue has come in and played well enough to keep them winning. Braden Point's obviously having a career year. He's another guy who's going to get paid this summer. But I always like the Predators, the way they play, just the way they're so balanced, and the fact that David Poile is a GM who's not afraid to make a big, bold move in the middle of the season to strengthen an area. I mean, we saw the Ryan Johansson, Seth Jones deal a couple years ago. So he's definitely a guy who, for as loaded as the roster is, and as strong as Pekka Rinne has been playing last year as well as this year, if he sees an opening and an opportunity to upgrade an area, he's certainly not going to be shy about taking it. I like that approach, and I also love the city of Nashville. I think it's a great hockey town, and being there a couple years ago for the Stanley Cup Final, I would love to cover another Stanley Cup Final in Nashville, because every single game day was a party out in the streets by the arena, and it was such a great time. So either one of the cities either one of those teams would make for great Stanley Cup champions this year. But I think in the end, I could see Pekka Rinne, finishing another strong season with a Stanley Cup at the moment.
Perfect. Well, Sean, thank you very much for your time, as always. Anything you want to plug before we go?
No, you can just check out our stuff over at NBC Sports, Pro Hockey Talk. We're doing the usual, covering everything every single day. So appreciate everyone who stops by to read.
Perfect. Sean, thank you very much for your time.
You got it, Rob.